So, what are the skills you need to succeed as an in-house service design professional? Is it about mastering journey maps, or is it knowing how to visualize a complex idea on the fly? Is it about having a 5-year plan, or knowing how to make an impact in your first 90 days? Welcome back to our special series where we explore the real, lived experiences of the professionals who are shaping services from the inside. This series is all about pulling back the curtain, to move beyond the polished case studies, to learn from the on-the-ground insights and hard-won lessons of those in the trenches. Hey there, great that you've tuned in again to the Service Design Show. As you know, I love bringing you the wisdom from some of the most well-known leaders in our field. But I am just as passionate about spotlighting the practitioners who are doing the crucial day-to-day work of improving the services we all use. These are the professionals who understand the gap between theory and the messy reality of actually getting things done. This conversation is the next in our deep dives into the world of in-house service design, and today I am joined by two guests, Heydn Erickson and Ben McCammon. Both are seasoned professionals and also founding members of my Circle community, where they recently facilitated 2 great community sessions. If you are not familiar with the Circle, it's a community for in-house service design leaders and those who aspire to be. I started it almost 5 years ago because I saw that driving change from within an organization can sometimes be a very lonely journey. The Circle is designed to be your team of allies, a place to find support, share challenges, and grow with the help of your professional peers. If that sounds interesting to you, you can learn more about our community over at servicedesignshow.com/circle, and you'll also find this link in the show notes of this episode. So today you'll be hearing from Heydn and Ben. We explore their surprising journeys into service design and unpack the key insight from their Circle sessions. Heydn shares why visualization is a superpower that goes way beyond the journey map, and how to use this superpower to drive discussion and build consensus. Then Ben introduces a powerful framework for your first 90 days in a new role, using the STARS model to diagnose an organization's true situation and match your approach to its context. And of course, as always, we get into the nitty-gritty of what it really takes for you as a service design professional to move the needle inside an organization. So if you are ready for some honest stories and practical wisdom that you will not find in the textbooks, you've come to the right place. I'm your host, Mark Fontijn, and you are listening to the Service Design Show. Welcome to the show, or I should say welcome back, Heydn and Ben. Yes, there you are. I need to look on my screen.
Hi, Mark.
Hey, Mark.
Good to see you back. We are going to chat about in-house service design. We are going to chat about your Circle dinner table sessions. It's good and important to note and fun to note that you have and still are the Circle founding members. You have been here since day one. You have also been featured on the podcast a few times, at least you, Heydn. Ben, I've also spoken with you on the podcast, right?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Yeah, cool. Good to have you back for a new session. What we like to start off with in these special episodes is to understand a little bit about your journeys into this field of service design. So Ben, let me start with you. Could you sort of give us a bird's eye view of how did you end up in the position where you are today?
Yeah, I mean, the short version is I had about a decade-long career as like a graphic designer and art director, so kind of a different kind of design. And then partway through that, I sort of realized, I don't think I want to do this for another 10 years. So I went back to school and learned about experience design and innovation and strategy and research, and that kind of pivoted me into working at some agencies doing that kind of thing for a few years. And then that led to moving in house and doing it inside an organization instead of from the outside.
And currently,
So,
you do not have a service design title, right?
yeah, I mean, it's the word is not in my title. Service innovation is in there, so kind of like a cousin term, but yeah, and we don't always use that word when we talk about what we do, but it's definitely a part of what I do day to day.
All right, interesting. Thanks for sharing. Hayden, this is going to be interesting because the graphic design
Mhm.
and the visualization aspect is going to come back in our conversation today at a later moment. Is it also your background? How did you get into the role that you have today?
Yeah, it's funny. I was just noting that as well. Yeah, my background, it came through visualization a bit. It's a long, circuitous journey. I won't spend too much time through different design disciplines. I thought I wanted to do architecture, eventually discovered industrial design. And in that program is where I found service design. And I was in love. It sort of connected a lot of my prior interests around systems, as well as design thinking and creative problem solving and addressing business and organizational issues. And the rest is history. I took some good studios with what ended up becoming my first company, and I was hooked. Yeah, and now I'm here.
Now you're here, still here. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, cool. So, one thing that sometimes is a little bit mysterious is what do service design professionals actually do on a day-to-day basis, because we almost never get the question to actually design or redesign a service. So Hayden, without breaking any non-disclosure agreements or getting fired, like, could you share a little bit about the things that you are currently working on?
Yeah. I work for Autodesk currently. So really exciting changes and innovation happening in the organization right now. Different teams are going through different updates. So I've been helping the sales organization most recently with new processes, new tooling, a more efficient process there. Before that, I helped with some of the website redesign as well. So in that, there's a lot of co-creation, workshopping, journey mapping, as one could imagine, research, and then I guess, again, a bit of a foreshadowing for my circle topic. In between these moments, trying to gather my thoughts using visuals that ended up having more legs than I thought. And so that was one reason why I had the inspiration to do this as my circle topic, thinking, this visualization thing, maybe we should dive into that a little bit more and talk about it. But in any case, yeah, working on some really exciting challenges, helping the organization grow and scale, and using service design and journeys to get there.
Cool. Thanks, Ben. What about you? What are some of the things that you are busy with these days?
Yeah, so I work at a financial services firm, and our team has kind of grown up in the operations world. So a lot of the partners we work with are like the folks who run the call centers, who kind of deal with all the behind the scenes stuff to do what clients and financial advisors need to get done. So um, some of the things we're working on recently, it's pretty big range. Like on one end of the spectrum, we've been helping to kind of socialize and spread the gospel around some experience design principles. That's sort of a very like high level kind of, spreading stuff and saying to people, hey, do what you can with these. And then on the other end of the spectrum, like we work on projects where we might be very kind of zoomed into a specific experience that people are having. The one that we're working on now, and we've actually worked on a few times over the years, is a pretty emotional experience when like a client has actually passed away, and whoever the family member is has to like settle up all their finances and their accounts. In other words, like in Canada we call it like settling their estate. um, and we're sort of looking at like how can our company be easier and more sort of easier to deal with, recognizing that it's a very emotional time. So that's sort of the other end where we're zooming into a very specific experience and trying to look at people, process, technology, how could we make that a better outcome for everybody involved?
Out of curiosity, like where is your team located inside the organization? Like who are you, for instance, reporting to?
We report to basically a VP that has a bunch of sort of, we call them enablement teams that support across operations. So we are within operations. I mean, if you think about, we have some pretty classic org structure, like there's marketing, there's sales, there's product development. These are financial products, and there's operations and technology. So we're in that operations space, which I think is not, unheard of for service design teams, but I know the other folks in the circle, I mean, people might be located in lots of different departments or divisions. So
Yeah.
ours is pretty squarely in the operations world.
We're doing the yearly salary plus report survey, I think at the time that this episode comes out. And one of the questions there is also like, where's your team located, situated? So we'll need to cross-reference those results. Heydn, also curious from your perspective, like you're currently with Autodesk, you never know how it's going to be next year or 3 years when somebody's listening to this episode. But in its current state, like, where does your team sit?
Yeah, we are under the chief operating officer. Our group in particular. So, sorry, let me just take a step back. When I say I work for Autodesk, I don't make AutoCAD. I don't make Revit. Although I've used those tools, I love them. They're great. They're powerful. We work within sort of the chief technologist office under this chief operating officer. So we're really focused on marketing experiences, so those auxiliary touch points, the website, like I mentioned, the internal processes that enable this, support experiences, account experiences. So everything that sort of connects and bridges those product experiences, but we're not in them necessarily. There are different teams who do that. So we have service designers, UX designers, researchers, and other folks within our team. We're called Growth Experience Technology. But then we have partners who do research in other groups as well. So yeah, as your question implies, knowing where service designers work and how we function within broader organizations is always a fascinating question, because we're always in different places.
Yeah. Spread out or centralized or lost. Maybe we need to add that option to the survey as well.
I don't know where I am.
Yes.
I don't know. I have no clue. Help.
Yes.
Heydn, I would be curious from your perspective. So one of the challenges is often defining, understanding what the challenges are that service design professionals work on. The other thing that's often challenging is, okay, so what does success look like? How do you define success? How do you know on a Friday afternoon that this has been a good week?
It can vary. For me, it's about awareness and impact. So we're really diligent about trying to connect different insights from both our group, but also using Journey as a sort of the organizational sort of connecting artifact between different teams. So also giving attribution where relevant to different partners, kind of putting all this in an experience, using that to help drive decisions and impact. So being able to connect those insights literally to opportunities or ideas and connecting those to solutions, knowing that we've been able to have an impact in one way or another through this work, be that raising a flag and seeing around the corner to know that an experience that we're designing may need tweaking or adjusting based on an insight that we have, being able to bring people together and drive consensus on something that maybe was a question before, or where there was no conversation. So those sort of impacts kind of, to me, mean that I've had a good week. I'm thinking a lot about the bringing people together, because that's been a big part about my work, is sort of helping folks understand some of these experiences that we're about to create in the area of sales, as I mentioned, and being able to optimize that and prototype it and think it through with journeys. So yeah, this is all to say that I think impact can come big or small, but to me, that's where I'm thinking about a good week for me.
That's interesting. The example of bringing people together, it's it is very tangible. You see people coming together, or you don't see people coming together. At the same time, at your yearly review, like, is that also the qualification criteria that your manager, your boss sort of looks at? Hey, Heydn, how often have you been able to bring people together? Like, how does that conversation go?
Well, I don't know yet. I have yet
I know.
I was a contractor last year, so as a full-time employee, I will find that out very soon when I have that very conversation you're referencing. I do know that as a team, this is kind of planning season, so being able to have an impact on roadmaps is important. Helping to define future research needs, helping to define roadmap items. I have been able to have my fingerprints on a few of those things relating to the projects I'm on. I would say that's for us as a team, our goal. And then for me, yes, I would think that I can and should point to specific instances where I have brought people together and had impact in the specific projects that I've been a part of.
Yeah. Yeah, so that is an interesting insight, as in the roadmap that you, for instance, mentioned. Are you able to influence the strategy of the organization, the investments, the direction? And those are very tangible things, again, you can point to as a part of a service design initiative that, like, we often talk about measuring the impact of service design or the value of service design, but that is so hard, as we know. Those are, like, that can be years out.
Yeah.
But, like, and we discussed this in our Discord channel, and Ben, you mentioned that, like, leading indicators, if you are able to influence roadmaps, that's all. Well, that should be, I think, an indicator of success, right? Heydn?
Yes, I will say one of my happiest moments. There have been a few, actually quite a few. But in this topic, being able to literally contribute to the log of backlog items, writing that down, being able to literally connect it then into the journey, and from that backlog item, being able to connect that to the journey as well. And I meant to say from the journey to that backlog item. So creating that bidirectional sync to an actual roadmap. That was really exciting. And then handing that, putting that in the hands of the project managers and having them continue to execute them. That was incredibly satisfying. It went from just being an idea or an opportunity card or a solution card to actually being something real. And yeah, it doesn't always happen. And I think that our impact can be measured in other ways, but it is a very visible, satisfying example of impact as well.
I'm curious from your perspective as well, Ben. So what does success look like for you?
Yeah, it's funny when you were saying that, Hayden, it reminded me of, like, how little or how maybe infrequently we actually get to see something tangible quickly. And I was just remembering, like, when I used to design stuff that was a bit more ephemeral, like, hey, here's a brochure, it got printed, like, but at least it's,
Mm-hmm.
you see it in a matter of weeks instead of years. So yeah, I guess that's resonating with me, that sometimes, like, it does take time. I think for our team, like, I would agree with Hayden, like, the impact, there's lots of different types. And I would say one type that probably really matters when I'm maybe, talking to my boss, or, like, trying to show the value that our team is providing to others. And this is part of probably our, our location, like we're saying in operations, is, like, we do try to actually have outcomes that we can say, like, this changed. So it could be, like, they're kind of, like, they're not necessarily super exciting things, but they can be really important as, like, ways to measure that the experience is different, or that different things are happening. So it could be things like timeliness. It could be, like, the number of complaints or escalations has gone down. We have some, like, perception-based surveys where we can do before and after comparisons sometimes, although that's usually really hard to say, like, ooh, that improved just because of the thing that happened on this one project. But we do, I think in that way, we do try to talk with our partners about, like, what are the outcomes that matter, and then try to measure them and monitor them beyond when we stop working on something. Because, like you were saying, Mark, a lot of these things have a long tail of, we might not see the results day 1 or day 30 or day 90. It could be longer. But I'd say the other thing, and maybe this came up for me when Heydn, you were talking about connecting with people and connecting people together. I think a lot of times what precedes those outcomes is actually like helping a bunch of teams collaborate who don't normally work together, or who maybe do on paper work together, but they don't necessarily like come together to solve a problem or really understand, what are you doing? What are we doing? How does it fit together? So that's probably, Mark, one of those things that's like, it's a little less tangible, and it's not like I don't have like a list for my boss of like, we enabled 37 kind of cross-functional collaborations, but I'd say that's almost like a precursor to those outcomes showing up, is if we can actually help people work together in a different way. And on a personal scale, sometimes that's just like, I had an example recently of having a good conversation with someone who leads a different team, and then we sort of said, hey, we should talk more, and this person said, well, why don't you join this regular meeting that we have that's just basically about intaking opportunities and triaging them, and then you'll be able to see what's coming up over here, and maybe you can connect it to some of the things your team is working on. So I mean, that's like, again, a very small scale thing, but to your point of like, at the end of that week, I was like, oh, this was a good week because something like that happened. Right? So.
Yeah, no, thanks for sharing. And the fact that we sort of have to think about this, and that there are so many dimensions and perspectives on what success could look like, is, I think, for me, one of the sort of pieces of evidence of what we're doing in the conversations within our community, that every Friday we actually invite people to share, like, what was the win of the week. Because if you see somebody else celebrating something, like you just said, maybe just getting invited to a session with another team, that might spark a light bulb, like, oh yeah, like that is actually what our work is partially about, and we should celebrate and recognize that. Yeah, cool. Thank you for sharing that. I want to pivot and transition slowly but surely into sort of the content of your dinner table sessions. Now, for somebody who's listening, has no idea what a dinner table session is or what the Circle community is about, in our Circle community, we host monthly sessions. One of them is the dinner table. We get together for 2 hours. We have a host. It's not a workshop. It's not a presentation. Again, imagine sitting at a dinner table with 10, 15 smart people, and you have a subject, and we try to explore it together. Practical wisdom, lived experiences. It's very much about stories. They are driven by the community. You both had the opportunity to host, and therefore select or sort of put a topic forward. And I would love to start with you, Heydn. We're going back to what we discussed earlier, and that has to do with VAS. What is VAS, Heydn?
Uh-oh. Visualization.
Visualization
as a service. Yes. Yes, yeah. I made a bad acronym joke. So many things are as a service now, and of course we're service designers. So in my setup slides, I wrote VAS as a bit of a tongue-in-cheek joke. Always good to poke fun at your own process at times. But yeah, Ben, you mentioned earlier sort of this example of working across orgs, and what do you do and what do we do and what's the overlap. And I had, on a whim, made a Venn diagram sort of thinking through that very question during a collaboration over the past few months. And I was just a little surprised at how much that Venn diagram was getting forwarded and how much people were like resonating with it and using it. And I was like, this was just me sense making. And it made me reflect on the power of visualization and how I had also been struggling sort of conveying data, the use of data in this new process that I'm diagramming. I had been struggling with, working across different groups because we all have our own terms and acronyms. And so I took a step back and realized there may be something to this visualization thing. And I never had the privilege of getting to do graphic design or art direction, which I think is awesome. So I just wanted to pick the brains of my fellow circle members. How are they using visualization? Where are they struggling with it? Where are they surprised by it? Where are they surprising stakeholders with it? And also to reflect on, because we're designers, those visuals that, yes, you make when you take the time, but the visuals that you kind of make very quickly when you don't necessarily have that time to pixel push and be perfect. But even then, those get through to stakeholders. And we, that was sort of the inspiration, and just thinking about that as one of our unique superpowers as well. Being able to sort of bring those groups together, like we were talking about,
and I think
create a common artifact that gets through to people. Yeah,
I think you also mentioned at the start of your session that maybe if we think about visuals, the first thing that nowadays comes up is the journey. But you explicitly said, okay, let's go beyond that.
Yes, yeah, no journeys allowed. So we were obviously our journey maps are bread and butter. I was just in one yesterday, and I will be in one today. But this was about everything else. So like the Venn diagram, or prioritization, or storyboards, or renderings, or I showed the design squiggle, just referencing like a very quick sort of like analogy to our process that I've also used with stakeholders. And also, funny enough, they kept going back to the squiggle in a workshop I did, and they understood it better than I could have explained our process in a much longer period of time. So it was making me reflect on the power of visuals. And yes, Mark, we wanted to think beyond just journeys. I did allow a loophole, which was if you wanted to show the visuals that you put in a journey map, fine. But the journey map on its own, where we wanted to go beyond that. We had a really fun conversation about both the successes and the challenges with that, and some of the takeaways.
And on that cliffhanger, I'll get back to you on what the key insights were in a second. Ben, your session, was it about a superpower? Not sure, but it was it had to do with reflecting on our craft for sure. Can you tell a little bit more about which topic you decided to bring forward?
Yeah, maybe the link is sense making. We had a good discussion about this kind of like a moment in time when you're starting a new role. We're a group of in-house service designers, so we were talking and thinking mostly about having a time when you started a new role inside an organization, and how do you figure out what matters? How do you kind of figure out the situation that you're actually walking into, and therefore like match what you're going to do in the first. We use the framework, the first 90 days, right? The first 3 months. But what do you do in those first 90 days? And how do you make sure that what you're doing is a good fit to the situation that the overall organization is in? So, it was really inspired by, like, I'll plug the book where this kind of came from. There's a great book by Michael Watkins called First 90 Days. And inside it, there's one of the things that I've found really helpful when I've started new jobs in the past is there is kind of this diagnostic framework that looks at, it's called the STARS framework, and it looks at, different situations that an organization can be in its own sort of life cycle and evolution. And then the idea is, okay, if I can get a good sense of which of these situations they're in, then I'm going to do certain things and not do other things. So that was sort of the core of the conversation.
Yeah, and it's how do we get to set ourselves up for success?
Yeah.
Whether you're starting within a new company, a new team, a new department, like where should you focus your time and energy in the first 90 days so that the next 90 days become a lot easier, right? Sort of that, I think that was the premise.
Exactly. Yeah. And the first time that I came across this, it was sort of this like forehead slap of like, oh, of course you should figure out, what's the bigger context that you're stepping into and try to match that. It's a bit like, okay, if we're all going to go swimming, I shouldn't bring ice skates, right? Like, but it really did help. And I think that is, it is part of what we do as service designers. We try to like understand the big picture. We try to make sense of, situations and dynamics that are going on. It's really hard to do when you're like, especially if you're not part of that organization and you're trying to figure this out before your first day. It's not like you can just look it up on their website and get the answer, or ask ChatGPT and get the answer. So it does require some creative research and sense making and asking questions and maybe talking to people. But if you can get a sense of it, yeah, hopefully it'll help you be successful as you go forward.
All right. Also want to hear some insights that you took away from that session. But first, we'll bounce back to Heydn. So visualization as a superpower beyond the journey map. What did you take away from that session? And what was the overall maybe vibe and sense that you got from the audience?
Well, first of all, I think the vibe was really great. It was fun. I love circle sessions where we share examples. I've done that a few times in the past where it's like, okay, put your screenshots. This is a safe space. We're not going to copy. So like for people to sort of showcase their work, and also to intentionally ask people the work that you were maybe didn't spend a lot of time on, which I think we tend to be very dismissive of, like, oh, I didn't spend time on this. This isn't perfect. But it's like, no, I want to see those things, as well as the things that you took time to focus on. That was awesome. So those sort of the vulnerability sharing, sort of getting a peek behind the curtain, I loved. And I think that created a sort of a closeness in our conversation. Stepping back though, thinking about some of the takeaways to that point about the spectrum between, pixel perfect polish and fast and quick and dirty, we reflected on what it means to be good versus and effective when it comes to a visual. And there is a distinction. And often we try to focus on good because, again, we're thinking about that illustration perfection, that graphic design polish. But sometimes something quick on a whiteboard or a Venn diagram that you threw together in a fig jam, that's more than adequate. Because the goal too, another thing we talked about was, again, it's not about perfection, it's about discussion. You want to create something that people can react to. So a lot of the reflections in the group were about what it means to create something that's good enough, that creates discussion, remembering also that, too, if, I had a boss that told me this, like, why are you aiming for 100% when you make a deliverable, when you're getting feedback and you have that inevitable iteration? So why not aim for 80 or 90 or whatever and let that be there? So I've reflected a lot on some of the discussions, both in your episodes, Mark, and others that I've had in the field about being rough around the edges, doing things intentionally, like not making it so perfect that people feel like, ooh, I can't give you feedback. So in a way, you're undermining your objective of making a visual if you spend too much time on that. And we talked about sort of some of the challenges there and the realizations that we've had. Two other things in this quest to make a visual, you are trying to make something simple. You're trying to take those 1,000 words and put them all in a picture. But sometimes you also need to show the 1,000 words. One circle member in particular told this great story about how they showed a really complicated map and there was no other way around it. And the objective of the exercise was to realize how complicated this service or system was so that we could then talk about how to make it better, rather than trying to go in and make something beautiful and perfect and simplified and easy to consume. It was not easy. It was not working as intended. The objective was to make it complicated. So it was this funny sort of tactic we realized where sometimes you just need to make it complicated. And then the last thing is we often wait for permission to do things. Maybe Ben, to that example, sometimes we want to be a member of that call to help triage opportunities or ideas, but we don't think it's our place. We don't feel like we have permission. With visuals too. Like, is it my place to stand up? Should I be sharing my screen and diagramming this conversation? And we also realize, like, yes, we're not the only ones, but this is a superpower. And so we should feel empowered to stand up with the marker or the digital, the mouse, as it were, and start, capturing things visually, because that can really help drive clarity, consensus in ways that we undervalue maybe our own capability there, but we can bring a lot of value to these conversations. And so it's really our superpower to claim. So those are some of the the things that came out from the conversation for me, some of the examples.
Yeah. So
Yeah, and it was a great conversation.
what I'm hearing you say is basically leading into these superpowers instead of trying to blend in
Yeah.
and sort of, and I don't know,
Yes.
trying to hide
Yes.
it, and trying to be
Yes.
better in the written word in business language, while and what we bring to the table is the power to visualize whatever
Yes.
or use visuals for sense making. One of the things we do at the end of our sessions is write down 2 sticky notes. One is, what is your main takeaway? The other one is, what's the action that you will take based on today's session? Do you remember, Heydn, what you wrote down on that sticky note? And if not, can you make something up on the spot?
Oh, if I am a hypocrite. I don't think I wrote my own travel log for my own session.
So
I didn't
what is
realize
the action that you will take based on that session, based on those insights?
it was to if I have an instinct to start visualizing, do it. Often, like Mark, I know that you had sort of a sketch a day, reminders, getting people to practice. It's something that can go rusty, and I loved that in industrial design. I loved sketchnoting. I loved the quick sketches. I did architecture too, and that's like an hour render. In industrial design, sometimes you would do that too, but my takeaway was I want to just find opportunities to do that more. And that doesn't mean sketching, but it can mean visualizing something, representing a conversation, just leaning into that more. Like you said, leaning into that power. I wanted to talk about this because I feel like I'm deficient. So that would be my takeaway, is to be more practiced in that.
It's a muscle that we need to train, and it's interesting that you reminded me of that 30-day drawing challenge that we did a few years ago. I feel, Heydn, that might be something we need to reintroduce in the circle community. Like, just let's.
I like it.
For any member who's sort of interested, we could definitely do a 30-day drawing challenge, because it is a muscle, and if you keep practicing it, it becomes easier, more natural, more confident.
Yes.
Cool. Thank you for reminding me of that, and let's see how we can integrate that into our community activities. So, moving back to you, man. Insights, takeaways. What is sort of your feeling after the session?
Yeah. Can I just say, Heydn, to top up like on that hesitation to jump in, I think like the more we do just decide to visualize, I mean, I feel like almost every time I do that, people are grateful or appreciative. I think it'd be like 1 out of 1,000 times when someone might be like, what are you doing? Or like, why are you doing that? And almost, so I think for us to remind ourselves that like, it's probably going to be really well received, because it is sort of unique, and usually does lead a bunch of people to go, yes, that's it. Like, thank you for showing it visually so we can all understand it. So yeah, I would just +1 on the, if you have the instinct, try it out, because you're probably not going to get your wrist slapped. You're probably going to get a bunch of thank yous and, appreciation from the people. That's been my experience anyway. So it's a good reminder. Okay, so first 90 days. So yeah, Mark, maybe I'll just mention, like, I mentioned the STARS model. Maybe I'll just mention really briefly what the different situations are, because a couple of the insights, I think it's good to illustrate it with those examples. So, I mean, I won't spend a lot of time, but basically it's this idea that the organization overall kind of moves through different stages. And in this model, the STARS stands for startup, turnaround, accelerated growth, realignment, and sustaining success. And they're not necessarily linear, right? Think of it kind of like a flowchart where, a company could move from one to the other depending on what's actually happening, in their market and their environment. So I think some of the useful like insights and takeaways were when we really started to discuss, like, people were kind of sharing both what they've experienced in terms of, I went into a situation that was a turnaround, and this is what I did, to try to like understand the situation, or I went into something that I thought was sustaining success, but actually it was more like a realignment because, on the surface, it seemed like it was all about sustaining success, but actually, the idea of realignment is that um, things aren't so bad as a turnaround. Like a turnaround is like, oh my gosh, we're hemorrhaging money and customers, and like everybody knows that there's a huge problem that we have to fix. Whereas, realignment might be like, yeah, things are okay, but under the surface, there's a bunch of issues that nobody's really talking about. And, yet if we don't pay attention to them over time, we're going to find ourselves as an organization in a turnaround. So this idea of like matching your approach to the situation and not mismatching it. So like a good example that I remember we talked about was like, if you're coming into a company that's actually like in a sustaining success mode, so like they've had a lot of success, maybe there's been like a lot of great legacy, maybe there's people there who were part of creating that success. And if you come in and someone shared the example, like, and you start kind of telling all these stories about like, well, in my past, I've done this, I've done that, we should be doing this, like, I have all this great experience, you should listen to me. You might find that mismatch is there, and you get a lot of reactions, like people kind of like, we don't care about your whatever you did, like we're great, what, who are you to come in and like criticize how we do things? You don't know like all the amazing work that's happened before you showed up. I mean, I'm sort of over exaggerating, but if you imagine the same behavior, like me as the new person trying to share stories of like what I've done in the past and what's worked elsewhere, if it was a turnaround situation, people might be way more willing to listen. They're like, the house is on fire, there's an emergency, we need help. Oh, you've dealt with this somewhere else? Oh, great. Okay, like let's, like, we want to hear about it. So I think this idea of like the same behavior as the new person coming in, it's not good or bad on its own, but it's like it could be really well matched to certain situations, and it could be really mismatched to other situations. And that's sort of really the fundamental point of using this framework, is like try to get as close to the real picture as you can, so that you don't mismatch your behaviors, your approach, what you spend your energy on, or how you interact with people, especially in those like first few months.
And already that exercise, trying to figure out in which stage you are,
Mm-hmm.
is super helpful, right? Figuring out before even applying your approach, then like, where am I actually? What is the context? That I can imagine that's already super helpful. I don't know. Probably you don't have. I don't. When was your first 90 days? It must be a while ago.
It was a while ago.
Yeah.
And I tried to apply this, but like I said, it's always challenging to kind of come in, especially if you're coming from outside the organization. I mean, we had people share different versions of starting a new role. I mean, it could be, you're moving inside an existing company, so maybe you have more ability to understand, or you already understand the big picture. I think the other thing that stood out that maybe I'd share, because I think this was a kind of a common experience for a lot of people in the session, was trying to distinguish between like, what's the situation of the team that I've been hired into versus the bigger organization. And what I mean by that is like, I think we had a lot of people, and probably a lot of folks listening, if you work in a sort of quote unquote in-house service design role, you might share this experience of like, I'm the first person doing service design, or they're starting up a design group or a design team, or it might have a different name, but like a lot of people I think have experienced the idea of like, okay, I'm coming into a team that really feels like a startup, like the team is in startup mode. But I think a lot of what we were trying to do in the conversation is sort of say like, yeah, that is important, and that comes with its own like challenges and opportunities. But how do we kind of zoom out and understand like, but what's going on in the bigger organization? and sort of balance like what you have to do at the team scale, because it's kind of this startup, versus, okay, what else is going on around us or around me, if I'm like the only one there, that might be like easy to ignore or not put as much attention on, because it's obviously like not as in your face as your immediate situation. So I think that was a good part of the discussion too, about trying to balance out that focus between the team and the bigger organization.
What I love about both examples that you shared is, with these topics, let's take this first 90 days, it's probably not a topic that you would go out searching on your own. Like, nobody is going to sit behind their desk and think, okay, how am I going to think about the next first 90 days? This is like the serendipitous learning and getting exposed to things that might be super relevant, but if there isn't something or someone or an excuse to actually get it in front of you, like if you don't permit yourself the time and the space to give serendipity a chance, like you will never get exposed to these things. So that's what I love about these sessions is there's 2 hours in a month when you know that something interesting will happen. You just don't know yet what, and being open to that is, I think, super interesting. And in this case, it was the STARS framework. Next month, it's going to be something else. And it fills your toolkit and it helps you to think next time, oh, you know what? I think last time we discussed something in the circle. Now I know how to Google for it, or now I know the book to find it. And I think that's the big benefit of having these conversations, even if you are not in your first 90 days, right? Do you recognize that, Heydn?
Yes. Yeah. And I just being the advocate for visualizing here, because that was my circle topic, reacting to what Ben shared, I definitely want to give a plug to stakeholder mapping and ecosystem mapping as a really great artifact for making sense of new organizations. And for someone who's beyond their 90 days, even any new project, because you're always, like you said, Ben, there's who you are in Workday and what your title is, but then there's, that doesn't always map to maybe influence, that who actually can have the impact that you're desiring to have, or who do you need to bring together to actually think through this problem holistically. We always reflect on that, and I've recently been doing that a lot. Anyway, yes, it's a powerful tool.
I like that. Maybe we should.
I'm sorry, Mark. I don't think I answered your question, though.
No, but you inspired me.
Went straight for ecosystem map.
You inspired me to think of something else. Maybe we should do an exercise one day where we sort of create Venn diagrams between the two sessions and see what is in the middle. Because in this case, stakeholder map or an ecosystem map emerged from two what one could initially see as two very distinct topics, but there is always overlap. Okay, cool. Let's wrap up our conversation about the dinner table. This was in our seeding and scale season. Every quarter we have a new season. By the time that you're listening to this, we will be in the humanity and tech season, exploring all the interesting things about AI and probably a lot more stuff. So the next few conversations in this podcast series will touch upon technology, most likely. But you're not off the hook yet. I still have a few questions for you to sort of try to bring this full circle. There we go. Heydn, I'm curious, if you look back on your service design journey so far, if you had to pick one thing, what's maybe the lesson that you learned the hard way, like the biggest lesson in regards to being successful in service design?
Yeah, that's a big question. Maybe it's just knowing how to take time so you can go quickly. So sometimes maybe before you create an artifact, or you have a share out, or you want to come to some sort of conclusion, taking the time to confer, to reach out, to collaborate with people individually, especially if they're a key stakeholder. I haven't necessarily done this myself, but I've seen it happen where, if you don't necessarily do a little bit of that politicking, that planning, that sort of consensus building beforehand, some people may not like the the on the spot nature of a workshop. They may not like having to react to something that they weren't anticipating in a live setting. So taking the time to sort of build that consensus before, so you can move quickly in those collaborative discussions. I think that's a big lesson I've seen, where if you don't do that, you may have roadblocks, or those moments of collaboration don't happen as you wish. So I think smoothing that out, creating the conditions for that to happen, I think that's the one that's coming to me right now. And then two, maybe being willing to visualize it, to say it again. Like Ben said, I just want to reiterate your point. It was always well received. That was one of the conclusions. Be that taking a bunch of stickies and creating affinities or groups to help people realize, oh, we can have a simultaneous conversation and see the big themes, to creating an illustration or a storyboard or a Venn diagram, whatever it might be. These are things you should lean into often and early. And I think they can only help. And being willing to do so in an iterative way, not looking at anything as final. I think that's part of the thesis of journey management too. This is not a one-time deliverable, but it is a living, breathing artifact that has connections, and you have to advocate for it, and it's evergreen. Anyway, that's a bit of a soapbox moment, but yeah, I think visualize early and often, and gather consensus early before these public moments. I think those are some of the lessons I'd like to share.
All right. Okay. Does that overlap with your hard-won lessons, Ben, or do you have something else that came up?
Yeah, one similar, one different, I'd say. Start with a similar one. I think adjacent to what you're talking about, Heydn, for me, it's been kind of realizing that I really do have to put effort into like maintaining relationships with my partners and my colleagues. It's funny, I think this was a topic of a previous dinner conversation. We might have even done a podcast around. And I think for me personally, the reason it's kind of hard. One is like, I'm not a natural networker. I don't kind of have the gene that makes me do this by default. So I perceive it really as like, I have to be deliberate about it, and I have to kind of like keep at it. And, sometimes I wish that it wasn't that way, but it has been an important lesson, because I think while you could maybe say this about any job, that relationships are important, and it's about like investing in those relationships with the people you work with, I think there is something where that gets dialed up in service design, especially if you're in a bigger organization, because, we often are having to maintain so many different relationships across so many areas, and in ways that are about, more about influencing, and not just like, you're going to do what I want because I tell you to. It's like, we have a relationship, you trust me, we've worked together in the past, and then that's how things kind of happen instead of not happening. So I think that's been a big one for me. And I guess the second one that's a bit different would be just, especially like working in-house, the realization that, and maybe I'd say it as like kind of having to have a bit of a thick skin, in the sense that like, not everything we try or not everything we propose is going to get, approved. Not everything we try is going to work. Not every project is going to be a home run. Sometimes things don't get done or don't work because it just wasn't the right time. And that's a really hard, I mean, maybe again, I'm just speaking personally, but as a designer, you kind of feel like, but the idea is so good. We did all the research. We like everything, and then it's hard to kind of just accept that like, it just wasn't the right time. And I've seen things come back a year or two later, and people go, oh, we should do this. And you're like, what, why are we saying yes now? And you realize like a lot of it has to do with timing, and really what that means is like, what else is going on. So I guess back to that thing of like understanding the bigger picture, and understanding what's the context that the organization is in, that can kind of help me at least sometimes realize that like, okay, I might be disappointed by something that didn't happen, or something that didn't get enough traction or whatever, but realizing like, oh, that's because of this bigger reason or this bigger driver that is probably out of my control, but is still important to understand. So I think that would be my like tie-in back to, the bigger context matters, right? Yeah.
I have a follow-up question to that, because when you are in the business of service design, you are basically always advocating for change. There's something that needs to
At
be
some
improved.
scale, yeah.
And you're always going to meet pushback, resistance. And I'm really curious from you. You mentioned thick skin, sure. But then, like, that's not enough to keep you going. So what is the thing that keeps you going? What keeps you motivated to come back on Monday?
Well, I think it's a little bit like you were saying, this practice of like, yeah, try to celebrate small wins, try to recognize, okay, that thing didn't happen, but this other thing did happen. It's tough. I don't want to make it sound like it's just like an easy thing of like, oh, just pretend that didn't bother me and say, oh, but this little thing happened. But I do think it's a good habit, um, to kind of look at like, well, what are the things that indicate a little bit of progress or indicate like maybe, yeah, a new relationship we formed, or hey, we were asked to participate in something that used to be, I don't know, behind closed doors or something like. So yeah, and I guess maybe like, uh there's this term I've heard in the past, which is sometimes it's like this phrase of like book the win, like actually let the win um register with you. Don't kind of just rush off to the next thing, but actually take a moment to like internalize the fact that you had a win or that your team had a win. Or maybe like, I think it's helpful too when someone on your team says it to you, like, hey, that was actually a win. Or, I hope you're really proud of that because I see that as like a great
Mm.
bit of progress. Sometimes we need to hear it from
Mm.
someone else, right? We can't always be our own only cheerleader all the time. So maybe
Mm.
that's I'm just sort of realizing this as I say it out loud. Maybe that's a good reminder to like point out to other people their wins more often to help them stay motivated too.
Interesting. Thanks for sharing. And Hayden, what about you? Like, are you going back on Monday? And if so, and next to the paycheck, what is going to get you there?
Yeah, I'm definitely going back on Monday. Very much looking forward to that. I just want to first of all second what Ben said. It's really important to. Uh, Earlier we were talking about the perfectionism that we all carry as designers and sort of thinking it's all or nothing, or I have to get 100% of what my goal is. So, we want to be in the room and sort of have the wow insight that knocks everyone away. Maybe just getting in the room when you weren't in there before was enough. Or examples come to mind of working with stakeholders, trying to get them to do research. They were resistant. We finally did research, and now they're asking for research from us. Like, so even though we're like, well, but yes, but we, or no, but we could have done it earlier. No, but we could have done it this way. Just take the win, like you said, Ben. Like, recognize, hey, we proved the value, and now they're asking for it. That's really important. And to be thoughtful about what is progress, knowing what those signals are, I think that's really important. Yeah, and similarly for me, it's been a real privilege being asked to come into some of these tables or rooms or whatever metaphorical space, to help drive decisions, to help advise, to help share, visualizing. I that's what brings me back, is just sort of the dynamism of the organization and the trust that we've been able to slowly accrue through showing up, through being partners, through building relationships. Ben, I think about what you said too, the importance of that. I'm taking the time to develop rapport and a reputation with these folks so they understand the value we bring. And we've been investing in that, and it's paying dividends. So for me, it's it's an honor to come, and I what brings me back is sort of the impact that we've started to build and the trajectory that I see, that we will be able to continue to have.
celebrating those wins. We keep coming back to that, and I'm sure that if I would let AI analyze our episodes, that would be surely in the top 3 of the recommendations that we give. So there must be a practice that people start practicing more. To wrap things up, I'm curious, I'll start with you, Ben. Are there any final words of wisdom that you want to share with us, fellow service design professionals?
Well, that's a big question.
I know, like the first thing that comes to your mind.
Yeah. I'll just kind of riff on maybe a lot of what Heydn shared today and just sort of say, like, maybe like lean into what makes you different.
Be weird.
Yeah, like I've worked in many places where I already feel a little bit like the odd person out or the odd part of a team that's kind of square peg round hole. Now it doesn't always feel great, but like I guess there's advantages to being different too. So I'd say, yeah, like think about what your superpowers are, and especially if they're unique, try to lean into them and use
recognize
them
them
more
as
often.
superpowers.
Yeah.
I think the recognition part is super important. Thanks, Heydn. Final words of wisdom.
Yeah, I was lifting my notebook as I was thinking about one of my favorite talks from the global conference last week, and this is what my theme would be, which is this talk was around the 7 deadly design sins, and I think it connects to some of what we were just talking about here, which is that, you know, we have our process, and it is a lovely, amazing, innovative process. As executed in real organizations, though, you can't always get 100% of what you want. Like we were talking about, you know, Ben and I, what we think of as successful, delivering 100% of what's in our head versus what the reality is about what you can accomplish, being, you know, holding true to these superpowers, what our perspective is, our visualization, our systemic thinking, our collaboration first mindset, our evidence, you know, that we bring to the table, but also be willing to recognize that you have to be a little fluid. You can't 100% follow it like pedagogically, but sometimes you got to kind of adapt and be flexible, and that's okay. That's part of this role. So I would just say, for me, my advice would be, you know, stay true to what makes you you, but then find ways to be adaptable and fluid, because big organizations, they're dynamic, they're changing, and to serve them, you have to also be a little adaptable and fluid as well.
And on that note, we're going to wrap things up. Thank you both for coming on, for sharing your experience with us, for sharing your journeys, your stories, your lessons. It's always nice and good to hear the experiences from people who are sort of in the weeds, on the ground, instead of interesting theories, which are all also important, but we need to balance that. Yes. So thanks, Heydn. Thanks, Ben, for coming on, and to be continued.
Thanks for having me.
I hope that you enjoyed this conversation with Heydn and Ben, and that you're walking away with some fresh perspective on your own superpowers and the context that you are currently working in. If their stories about visualization as a superpower, or the first 90 days framework, or the simple act of celebrating those small wins resonated with you, I'd love to hear about it. What is a unique superpower you are going to try and lean into this week? Please leave a comment on this episode on Spotify or YouTube. And if this conversation has you thinking about how valuable it would be to connect with other in-house service design professionals for that serendipitous learning we talked about, and those deep, honest discussions that help you build your own toolkit, then we'd love to welcome you into our Circle community. In the Circle, you'll find a passionate group of smart, generous, and experienced professionals like Heydn and Ben, who meet every month to share wins, failures, and everything in between. It's all about pushing each other forward and getting that crucial sense check when you need it the most. To learn more about the Circle and how you can join us, head over to servicedesignshow.com/circle. And of course, you'll find that link in the show notes. Thanks so much for tuning in to the Service Design Show. My name is Mark Fontijn. Take care and see you soon.